Hello and welcome back to the Opener Sorcery. It's Devi, and today I am joined by Twisted.
Yo.
And we are going to be discussing how it was a thought process that came to me about we are the new elders. So I know the demographic that listens to us is on the younger side. I know that Twisted and we are not very old. I just turned 34. But I had this epiphany moment that because there was such a leave behind culture, and I'll expand on that while we were growing up, such a disconnect between any form of community. And you see our generation literally trying to claw that back with every fiber of our being. We are the new elders. So when I say we are the new elders, what does that mean to you, Twisted?
What it means to me is that, so if we want to go ahead and think of elders, right? People usually think of elderly folks. So, yes, they're old people, but why is it that they are elders? They have experience. They have lived a long life. They have wisdom, or at least, optimally speaking, they'll have wisdom because regardless of your actual physical age, you can have people who behave like immature children, as you and I both well know, and people who are listening are likely informed about that as well. But generally speaking, right, when we think of those who have lived a longer life, they have that depth of knowledge, wisdom, and experience that can be drawn upon for those who either have not yet gone through said situations or, may need additional insight into making decisions and choices. And in this sort of regard, when I think of elders, the visual sort of scenario that plays in my mind are of more so Aboriginal or native cultures, things prior to our heavy amount of industrialization, I should say, in the modern age, where we're more so going ahead and looking towards the chieftains. We're looking towards, some sort of elder council, some sort of shamans who in of themselves, were more so of these spiritual elders, spiritual advisors, and all that sort of thing in these communal sorts of situations that went ahead and once again guided all those other folks who are in a tribe or a community or, at larger scales, civilizations and so on and so forth. And of course we have those sorts of things, from the times of, our ancestors just going ahead and living in villages and living in less industrialized places up until now where, of course those societies still exist, but more so often than not, it is not necessarily those sorts of particular structures or as tied to nature directly. So that's more so what I think of when it comes to elders and all of that. But yes, please go ahead. Share with us the thought of we are the new elders.
So in the thought process that came to me about this, um, so just as an FYI, my background comes from a severe lack of family and family structure in any way, shape, or form. Um, and very much a large lacking of familial love. So when you take that and multiply that across, millions upon millions of American families, because quite frankly, yes, I am more so speaking to the American audience at present and the heavily westernized audience at present, because here we don't have that structure. That structure has been broken down. And from the experiences that have been had, those that are supposed to be the ones that are guiding us are literally trying to drive us off of a cliff in their seeking out of immortality at present. How natural cycles are supposed to go. And I actually take this from what I understand of more like Hindu type beliefs, where the leaders of a community are the ones that are, they may be older, but they are not the elderly. Um, they are the ones that have experience. Whenever you hit like 40, that is probably going to be your leaders of community. And then those that are actually beyond that, be like into the 50s and 60s, they take a step back and they become a guide, a an advisor versus a steadfast, stout leader, because quite frankly, there is a huge disconnect from that generation to the next. Um, and there is a lack of understanding, but it is a great guidance. It is a fantastic advisor, but an actual leader, it is not. And I love the image of them taking that time and actually starting to back away from not necessarily functioning society as a whole, but more so being able to make peace with themselves and de-integrate themselves into the everyday until they are being sought out for their advice, but they are not going to others
Oh
um,
yeah.
until the end.
Yep.
And it, quite frankly, the cycles that I have seen for that and the way that that was described to me, I found it so immaculate and it felt so natural that it is a terrible shame that we have not been able to build something sustainable for the next generation or the generation after because our supposed elders have been sabotaging us along the way. What I say when we are the new elders is we cannot depend on those that were supposed to take care of us to uphold tradition. We have to be the creators of that tradition now, and we have to be able to actually take up that mantle and wear it with pride. Even in our young ages, we understand what is morally right and what is morally wrong. We know where we stand. I'm not going to describe to you where you should stand because that is not my place. But we are the holders of that torch, regardless of whether we are 28, 35, or 42.
Oh yes. And in mentioning the particular sort of like Hindu approach or within Hindu societies. I know we're not necessarily doing it justice in regards to whatever the particular framework is and say the actual correct terminology, but I know what you're speaking of. And generally, to go ahead and just give a summary of it, pretty much when you are growing up and you eventually become an adult, right? Say 18 or so. Even over there they have that sort of similar standard, I believe. But you're pretty much going ahead and being more so of a student, you can say, going to college, higher learning, or just doing whatever in terms of occupationally. Then you go ahead and you become more so of a family man in the sense, you find the proper partner, you get married, and you also have children in that sort of sense. And that is more so like the period in which, you're alluding to of like say up until like the 40s and maybe you could even say early 50s, I don't know, but like those are the decision makers. Those are the ones who have the keys to the kingdom and are able to go ahead and steer the ship, you can say. They're more so like,
Mhm.
hey, look, they're not completely elderly, they're not elders yet, but they have some life experience. They're able to go ahead and navigate those waters well enough. They haven't just gone ahead and gone from being a child or adolescent and getting their feet wet. But then after that,
Mhm.
the next stage, you can say, next phase, is that taking a step back, you can say, and once their children have gone ahead and more so gotten up to the point of becoming students themselves, then that is when the father and the mother fall back and they more so focus on like, hey, look, this is our combined life together and sharing in that and letting the children go ahead and be able to come into their own, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then it is after that point, it is more so of, when you're doing that, you're more so like starting to get into the spiritual aspects, you can say, and giving, more so of a lifetime's worth for that sort of thing. Including also, just now that comes to mind, like, for those who are in Judaism, they want you to go ahead and be 40 or so until you go ahead and start, learning Kabbalah and things of that nature. But of course, we're using the Hindu framework primarily. That's just something that
Mm-hmm.
came to mind as a parallel. But then, after you have whatever amount of time in a certain phase of you and your particular partner, then you go ahead and you more so individualize. And that is when you have spiritual focus unto yourself and come to more so terms of that on a solo basis for the most part until it is time for you to go ahead and pass along. And that is where you get more so of the older yogis sort of archetype or, imagery and all that sort of thing with the long gray beards and whatever sort of manner of hair, whether it be dreads or whether it be longer flowing fine hair, depends on the preference and sect or whatever the case may be. But you get what I'm saying, is that it is in that sense going ahead and being able to, once you get more of that spiritual wisdom with your partner or on your own, then you can go ahead and dispense that to the active leaders, to the active adults who are more so that at the I'm trying to think of a proper way to put it, at the steering wheel.
Helm.
There you go. Yes. Yes. I was thinking car, you were thinking ship. Or technically, you could have a wheel that you're going ahead and using to direct the ship as well. But I digress. So, yes, you are correct in that sort of manner. And in the present society that we do have currently, at least in the United States, and you could even say in other places worldwide, such is not necessarily the case or always the case, when honestly it should be. And, like, we can go ahead and keep beating that particular point with a hammer and nail, but I do want to go ahead and bring up something. It's something we did discuss briefly before we went ahead and got into this conversation on record. And this is more so of a reference and a resource that those listening can go ahead and look into and use, kind of in a sense, to provide a framework for the times that we are living in currently. And I know that generally speaking, what it is I am referring to, because we've talked about it over the years, but for those who
Indeed.
are interested, it is called The Fourth Turning. So it is a book that was written by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And the subtitle is An American Prophecy, What the Cycles of History Tell Us About America's Next Rendezvous with Destiny. And there's also another book that more so came out within the past couple years of The Fourth Turning is Here. And that's more so, talking about modern day events and an update to the previous book. But primarily speaking, The Fourth Turning, the original one, should suffice. But in any case, the general idea of it is that there are 80-year microcosmic cycles that, once again, to a primarily American listening audience, that we happen to go through. This can apply to other civilizations, to other societies, potentially, but they are focusing on United States of America because they themselves are Americans. And with that, it is a recurring cycle that, in having these approximate, not exact, but approximate 20-year periods where there are 4 different archetypes and personas that present themselves based on the events of that time period and the people who are born during this period of time and how these sorts of things affect them based on the conditions. So, that being said, right, the first turning is considered a high. So that's the first 20-year or so period. And that is a profit generation in terms of that terminology. The second turning, is an awakening generation. And they're called the nomads. The third turning period is considered unraveling. And the generation born during that is considered the hero generation, whereas those born during a crisis generation or the fourth turning, that is the artist generation in and of itself. Now, just before I get into anything else of like a particular model of that, what are your thoughts when thinking about the whole idea of the fourth turning or the various turnings in of themselves in relation to, us being the new elders?
Yes, in terms of us being the new elders, and I know the last one is seen as the artists, but it is the artists that tell the truth. If we are to make that parallel, comedians are the ones that have always called out the king. That has been the jester's job. It is the artists that tell truth through painting and sculpture and have laid it bare. If art does not disturb you, it has not touched your soul. And quite frankly, art is not necessarily just the fine arts of painting and sculpture and marble work and things of that nature. It is also the home arts. It is cooking. It is sewing. It is crochet. It is knitting. It is all of those things that you will find that our generation is trying to bring back, which is hilarious because we've been called grannies for what, 10 years now? Like 15 years now? Because we actually have interest in those things that have unfortunately fallen out of societal favor. But for some reason, I guess our old souls potentially, and I'm using that term very loosely because old soul has a lot of different connotations with it as well.
And that's
But
definitely a subject we will broach at some point, more so in depth.
agreed.
But yes,
Indeed. But at the same time, the fact that those necessary things are being brought back, those crafts, those abilities to create what we have around us with our own hands versus going for mass produced bullshit. And we want to do it. We have a drive to do it. We take this as a hobby versus looking at, like, who doesn't like a good sale from whatever clothing store that has incredibly cheap things? Like, who doesn't? But what about making your own clothes? What about doing that for yourself? What about actually fitting your clothes the way that you need to instead of trying to conform yourself to a specific size? That's really what has been brought back. There is a lack of conformity. There is a lack of, I want to say, straight lines. And I think that is a perfect image for what our generation is. It is a lack of that. And in that artist being there, we're calling out the bullshit from the previous generations that refuse to let go of power. And that has been, I think, the problem that our generation has inherited. And just like the song says, we didn't start the fire. We didn't start it. It's been burning. And we've just been trying to fix what we can where we can. But because these wrinkly old fucking hands will not let go, we can't.
now, and when you go ahead and you talk about the artist generation, and more so aligning that with, say, the young adults or adults at present, in terms of, say, the actual or a parallel being made and all that sort of thing. There is a particular individual who has a series of videos on YouTube. One originally at the time of this recording and posting about 4 or 5 years ago during COVID-19 and all of that particular fun period of time. And he went ahead and summarized the books in of itself, and this is how I myself, and I know you as well, got introduced to the fourth turning and this particular concept. Now, the time periods that he goes ahead and denotes that I believe are also shared with the books themselves. I will go ahead and talk about it. So, just really quick, for those who would like to see those videos in of themselves, whether you want to read the books, or, just want to get more so of too long didn't read, give me more so the Spark Notes version of it. The channel is called Van Neistat. That's the individual's name. It was formerly known as The Spirited Man, and links to the individual videos I'll put in the YouTube posting of this video, discussion, conversation, what have you. But on to the actual point. So, the current period of four turnings that we are in. So, the last period of crisis happened to be the Great Depression and World War II, leading up into that, until it finally went ahead and hit a point of resolution. Then, we went ahead and our four turnings began with a high, and that was after the U.S. won World War II. So pretty much after that point, the U.S. was on top of the world, number one country, woo woo. We are pretty much at our high point of like, oh yeah, you know what, like, we went ahead and dominated, we went ahead and did what needed to be done to stop the evil Axis powers, and so on and so forth, right? That sort of thing. And that was from 1946 to 1964 in this particular measurement. So not exactly 20 years, but that was a high period. Now, you go ahead and you get from there to 1964, and that is an awakening period. And Van Neistat goes ahead and states that the awakening period began once JFK was assassinated. And when you go ahead and have that sort of awakening period, in 1964, that's when you get more so of the hippie movement, free love, all these sorts of things. Civil rights going ahead and, even though it was bubbling up in years prior, it goes ahead and gets particular more steam for, a couple years right there, in and around that sort of thing. Obviously, there's no hard stops or hard beginnings, but it's a sort of transitional period. You know what I'm saying. Those listening, and also to Debbie here. But then, once we get to 1984, we have the unraveling period starting. And this, in terms of Van Neistat's assessment, began with Ronald Reagan being elected, and all the different sorts of things that, his presidency brought into consequence, including, say, things like Iran-Contra, and, with that, in, the very, known now, sort of U.S. agencies bringing in drugs from down South America to go ahead and fund the Contras down there. And that sort of exchange, we went ahead and flooded our streets of our major cities with drugs, what have you, and all that sort of thing, which very much so went ahead and impacted minority communities quite a bit in a detrimental way, to say the least. But having that sort of thing going on, that's part of the unraveling of, this particular cycle. And that went all the way up to 2008 in a particular measure. So this being more so generous in terms of the time period. And then we have 2008 to 2028 with the question mark there in this particular video. And it's a time of crisis that began with the 2008 recession and financial crisis that, those listening to this video are likely to remember in some way, shape, or form, and all that sort of thing. Or if you didn't necessarily remember it in being rather young, which we usually tend to have these conversations for people who are at least adults and 18 and over, but, parental controls, people don't necessarily know how to utilize them. But in any case, right, this sort of thing is like where we go ahead and we have our biggest challenges, and this is where we sink or swim in this turning sort of cycle. And either we go ahead and we figure it out, or potentially we go ahead and sink. And just like with the Great Depression and World War II and all of that.
Mhm.
And, that sort of thing, like, I know you made the parallel between, you know, more so of like us and the artist generation, but in terms of this sort of model and structure, without particularly going ahead and giving too much personal details, we're both adults and we were both born during that unraveling period. So between 84 and '08, obviously. And we are more so of the hero generation. So we have grown up during a time of, downsliding, a time of things going from what was supposed to be better years into worse years. And we are more so the ones that have to enact that change. We have to be the heroes that become the elders eventually. So, fitting into the theme, we are the new elders, right? Those who are the elders are those with the lived experience to go ahead and say, you know what? We were going ahead and we went through some shit, some serious shit. Learn from these mistakes. Just like when you think of those who are World War II veterans and went over to Europe, went over in the Pacific and fought those battles and saw Nazi Germany and, doing all these atrocities, as well as, Mussolini's Italy and, the sort of shit that, Hirohito's Japan was up to. I believe that's the correct emperor for World War II. Can you correct me if I'm wrong on that one, Devi?
Honestly, you are asking the wrong person. I am not a names person. I am a faces person.
Oh, okay. But yes, so in any case, for those interested in World War II, go ahead and more so look it up and research yourself. But in any case, right, we were going ahead and we had a challenge in front of us alongside other people in the Allied powers. And that was a time of crisis on a world stage. Of course, the Great Depression hitting us economically and also affected other global markets because things are interconnected, not as much as now, but still, those were big challenges. Those were crises we were facing. And we had to, as a nation, pull together in some way, shape, or form to go ahead and confront that. Confront the evils of the day. Confront the issues of the day. And that is where we are at now. Whether it's Devi or I being twisted or anyone else within this age group of like, whether you are in a position of prominence or you are just someone who is run-of-the-mill day-to-day, what sort of impact are you making? What sort of thing are you stating? And all that sort of thing. What are you doing during this time to make even some sort of small ripple to help along humanity's evolution, to help us progress, and all that sort of thing in beneficial ways? Because there can be detrimental progression. There can be that sort of thing, of course, but helping to steer the ship, as we use that imagery beforehand. How are we going to go ahead and help steer the ship, especially when, we have, at least in terms of terminology of generations, the older folks, the boomers, that followed World War II, more so going ahead and being those who are not steering the ship properly. And us getting that experience. Because the hero generation of the previous turning were those World War II veterans, were those folks who recognized that they had to go ahead and take a call to arms, call to action, to whatever it is that needed to be done at that point in time. But yes, so that having been said, and getting into quite a bit of making that sort of parallel between then and now, what are your thoughts, Debbie?
So, in terms of that, yes. I hate the term the hero generation. I really do. More so because it acts as if all of the impetus is on that specific point and just, here, kids, do your thing. And it's just like, fuck you, mom and dad. That's not right. So that's a little irritating. And one of the reasons why I don't necessarily fuck with it. But overall, it is very true because we have lived through events, and I've seen it all over. I have said it myself. I have heard others say it as well. We have been living through a domino effect of unprecedented times since we became legal, or for some of us, since before we even became legal, before, we started puberty. You know, I remember I was in fifth grade during 9/11. I was 17 when the 2008 crash happened. Like, I remember these things so vividly. I know exactly where I was. And we have seen this tragedy over and over and over again. I'm sure you remember as a kid, and I remember from the 90s when I think it was just like the leftover from the 80s, like HIV kind of shit, HIV and AIDS. But because the South is so freaking regressive, we had that fear, and we were taught that fear from a very young age as well, which, to be honest, is absolutely ridiculous. Why should a 6-year-old potentially fear somebody for that? We're not exchanging blood. We're not doing those things. But hearing those things, experiencing those things, like absorbing them, just one after the other, after the other, after the other, and it has been constant. There's not even room for us to take a breath. And because of that, I hate it. But yes, we are the hero generation. And the hero generation is never going to be one that is sitting there going, "Hi, I'm Captain so-and-so, and I'm here to save the day." That's not how this works.
Less talk the talk, more walk the walk.
Definitely more walk the walk, and it is never out of want, it is out of necessity. It is, this shit is fucked up, and we can't take it anymore. And it has to change. It has to stop. And really, I want to do a little bit more research and actually do the timings and figure out what the turning was before, what the turning was before that, what the turning was before that. Because for me, measuring those things out and actually seeing those events in those blocks, I think would paint an even better picture overall. Of course, seeing the more modern effects is incredibly highlighting, but at the same time, seeing it from the historical perspective is also great. And from the historical perspective, I also want to bring in the Yugas.
Yes.
So, did you have anything else to say on the turnings?
Well, the only thing I really had to say was, once again, for those interested in the books, I'll go ahead and put links to those on a Goodreads link, and you can go get those books if you're interested, or get them in whatever ways and means you can. For the videos by Van Neistat, I'll put links in the YouTube posting of this. And when it comes to the turnings and you wanting to more so look past, just say, leading up to World War II is that climactic point, the video by Van Neistat does, in some way cover, at least in terms of American history, that of, from the Civil War, between the Civil War time of crisis to World War II. And prior to that, the Revolutionary War to the Civil War and such. And of course, this sort of theory can be applied to prior to that in other Anglo-Saxon European sort of civilizations or other worldwide civilizations as well. But for the Yugas, I will go ahead and chime in real quick before passing the ball back to you. You can say that the turnings, if we're looking at frameworks and models, the turnings are more so microcosmic, in that 80 years is really just a drop in a bucket, or, a few grains of sand in a larger beach, you can say. But the Yugas are more so macrocosmic, and, you can take the sort of year attributions in the original text as actual fact, or you can take it as allegory of just long times, and whether those measurements are correct or just referring to immeasurable periods of time for our perspective as human beings in this lifetime, or what have you. But depending on who you speak to in all of that, we are either just leaving or approaching a Kali Yuga. And this is where I'll pass the ball back to you to go ahead and share your thoughts in regards to the concept of the Kali Yuga, which is not actually in relation to the goddess Kali. It is more so in relation to the terminology of Kali utilized as one. And the reason for that is because I know you shared a video with me recently that
Hmm.
there's this idea that the Yugas are, the golden age being that where a bull has four legs, and then you get to more so of a, say, Iron Age, or the least spiritually in tune one having one leg in of itself, and that term Kali alluding to that in of itself. So yes. What about the Yugas and those more so larger cycles?
Well, I was actually going to pull that same imagery of the more stable a society is, the more stable that the world is, it has the four legs to balance on. And as the yugas pass, as each of these ages is marked, you lose a leg. So there is some aspect that is lost. It is believed that we are in the Kali Yuga at present, and that it is about to end. It is not that it is beginning, it is that the Kali Yuga is ending relatively soon. So from what I understand and from what I gather, is that the golden age, when all four legs are on the ground, if we're thinking of that imagery of the bull, that is where spiritual ascension can actually be attained. That is where we are living in tune with our surroundings versus manipulating them to the point of detriment. So think sustainable food forests where nature and humanity are working so in tandem that one cannot truly be separated from the other. It is a very naturalistic way of living, and it is very holistic, not in a crunchy sense, but more in a sense of this is how we were supposed to be. This is how we are supposed to interact with the world around us versus the ego of man going and destroying nature simply to put up a very tall building. Nature will topple it down. Nature will take it down because all it is ego overall. But it is believed that we are on one leg, and there is even a temple in India that is supposed to mark the yugas, and it has one pillar that is left. I haven't looked that up in a little while because I have had a feeling that either it is so soon to collapse or it is like almost there. But half of it was already in the water from what I understood the last time I saw it. But with the yugas being more of a overarching time period, like literally hundreds of thousands of years. So the supposed time frames, whenever we get to the big one, the golden age, where everything is great and everything is working in tandem and we're actually able to thrive and succeed and da-da-da-da, that is supposed to be 4 times as long. So each part is 432,000 years in length. That is a long freaking time. So multiply that by 4. That is 4 parts. Nearly 2 million years of living in that fashion of balance and tranquility and with the surroundings versus in the surroundings or manipulating the surroundings. And then the next one, the Treta Yuga, is 3 parts. So almost 1.3 million. Dvapara is just under 900,000, and then the Kali is 432,000. So with all of that, the most detrimental, the most materialistic, and the most spiritually disconnected one is the shortest. And that, I think, is one, a breath of fresh air. if we are speaking um, plainly, because that is the area where there is the most suffering. That is where the most atrocities happen, because there is such a disconnect from aspects of ourselves. And in the spiritual sense, because we are those kinds of people, that is this kind of channel. We are those kinds of peoples. We are in the age where spirituality is the hardest to come by. But here's the thing, having that shift from the Kali Yuga to the Satya Yuga, which is the golden age, apparently comes with cataclysm. That comes with the reckoning. And it is not an easy time to go into that transition, but once it does, it is just like a birth process. The labor is long, the labor is arduous, there is pain, there is possibly tearing, but once you get through it, it is immense relief, and there is something beautiful on the other side. And so tying that into we are the elders, because we are ushering in this time. As we have found, and I'm sure, Twisted, you can back me up on this, the seeking out of spirituality has been on such a rise, even since I was a teenager. I will say, like, my first experiences with spirituality, I was 12 to 14 years old, when I'm actually actively seeking out how to communicate with deities, how to really get into oneself and understand the world around us. Whereas from what I understand, that was not a experience that people were seeking out even a generation back.
Yes, and like, for me, I'll go ahead and say this. One, I know that we have gone ahead and covered previously the discussion on magic as a lifestyle, and kind of like, posing the question of like, 5 years from now, will people still be doing their practices or whatever, and all that sort of thing. And that being a little more so critical of like those who more so wear as an aesthetic previously. But of course, the reason why there is such a influx of people who are interested is because exposure through, say, the internet, or just like, people reacquainting themselves with this, these sorts of phenomena, these sorts of things. And to make a parallel to the idea of the Yugas, and more so of a Western and New Age based sort of framework, the idea of, we're coming into the age of Aquarius. It may be a little bit more so familiar for those who are listening, and all of that. Coming from the age of Pisces, and delving into that manner of astrology. For those who are interested, go research it. We're just going to serve as guideposts for a variety of things here. That's what we're here for, essentially. But in any case, right? Going ahead, and when we are thinking about this sort of change and people getting more so interested in that being tied in to coming into ourselves, more so understanding our true selves over time, and more so allowing ourselves to be interconnected with spirit, or what I refer to as soul dash spirit, in a sense, a couple different layers, but probably get into that at some point, my own semantics of it. But nevertheless, having those early on experiences, that is something that I know that you had for yourself, and I can attest to for myself as well. And I guess you can say that you're speaking more so to like a active beginning of active pursuing of these sorts of subjects,
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. And for me, that was around the same period of time as well. But a lot of people, I'm sure, who may be listening can possibly relate to, you can say, passive occurrences, where you were not necessarily at a time of being a teenager or adolescent and coming into your own, but you just had things happen to you. Like, you can say, like, a young child going ahead and having interactions with an imaginary friend who, lo and behold, wasn't necessarily so imaginary, and things got moved different places, or anything like that, or interactions with shadow beings, or, having, particularly vivid dreams, or, so on and so forth, right? Just name some examples. I know for myself, like, and this is something that, Devi and I have spoken amongst ourselves, and I've kind of like talked to other friends and associates of ours about generally, but the first memories that I happen to have, I was very conscious and aware, and I was like, hey, look, I know where I'm at. I know this particular location. And I was a little more so lucid in this sort of sense. And when I had this particular dream, that was part of my first memory. And then I went to all black. And I was aware of myself. And then I wake up. And then lo and behold, I'm in my childhood bedroom and all that. On one of the Hawaiian Islands, to be very generic and general about the region. But this is something that occurred when I was very young, my first memories, and from what I understand, is not something that's necessarily all too common. And that's not me going ahead and saying, oh yes, I'm a special little snowflake, or patting myself on the back, but you can go ahead and, like, in reflecting on yourself, whether it's me addressing Devi here, or, anyone who's listening, go ahead and be like, you know what sort of stuff happened to me when I was younger that seemed a bit too uncanny? And if you're of a closed mind of it currently, or you've been a little bit more so apprehensive to be open-minded, allow yourself to think. Could it potentially have been something that was related to there being psychic senses, or more so awareness of the non-physical realms and all that sort of thing? And just give yourself that ability, give yourself a chance, give yourself that space, and see whether it actually does, like, resonate or click with you, or whatever terminology is appropriate for you. But you would say for yourself that, in this manner of, you can say, the age of Aquarius ending, coming into the age of Aquarius from the age of Pisces, or going from the Kali Yuga to more so of a, going from a rock bottom, if you want to put in more so English terminology, towards ascending upward once again in exiting the Kali Yuga, that we're more so seeing this uptick of people having these sorts of experiences, which occurred in a sense even before now and throughout human history, but not as much documented, or not as experienced on such a wide scale. What are your thoughts in relation to that?
No, and I fully agree. And truly, because I fully believe that we are the new elders. We are the generation that is going to set the standard, because we cannot use what came before us. It is tainted. It is wrong. It is everything that we want to leave behind. Because we are the new elders, we have to set that standard. And I do believe a lot of us were born open, but society told us to close our eyes. Now, some of us never got the chance to close our eyes. Some of you were so lucky that you were born to a family that was already wide open and accepting and loving, and you are a very minute few, and my God, I'm so jealous. But at the same time, those of us that weren't, that did not get that, either had to shut our eyes because of whatever circumstances, whatever beliefs, whatever experiences that society told us, it's not real, go to sleep. Or those of us who never got the chance to close our eyes because of neglect or whatever circumstances. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but we're here. We're aware. We're awake. And because of that, we have to be able to set that tone. And I feel like this is so incredibly important. And I know it seems slightly political. I know it almost seems like I'm angry, but I am impassioned. I'm not angry. I feel this very, very much in my bones. And feeling something so strongly, I know it is not just me, it is more of a interior and exterior push that this needs to get out.
Oh, yes. To that point, I will go ahead and support you in that, honestly, in how we're addressing, how we're actually putting out there, like, it's not necessarily political, because it does not matter what, in terms of the American political system, does not matter if it's Democrat or Republican, they're both fucking up. Doesn't matter if it's independents. There's quite a few independents. They are fucking up. Who are more so of, older age groups or not necessarily steering the ship correctly and all that sort of thing. So in that sort of sense, like, it's more so of people in positions of power and influence, whether they be politicians or whether they be in other areas, the private sector, or bankers or lawyers or doctors, whatever sort of complex that they are a part of, like, this is where we have to recognize in of ourselves, how do we, in our own ways, if we are having a bigger platform to work with, or if we have more so just within a smaller sphere of influence, go ahead and create those ripples. And one way you can go ahead and do it is for those with children who are listening to us, who are adults and are able to go ahead and pass concepts on, pass what you learn, what you know already, but especially what you learn, because learning is an ever continual thing. Pass that on to the next generation. Whether it is, those who happen to be born during this time of crisis, to make reference to the earlier turnings concept, or, just even, kids who are born afterwards, or grandchildren, or whomever it may be. And of course, obviously, those of your own age group that may not necessarily be aware. Go ahead and just, how can you be better towards yourself and towards others? And in doing so, whether it be by getting more so spiritually attuned and doing magical shit, as we tend to cover quite a bit on Open or Sorcery, or just improving your own health, or going ahead and getting yourself in a better financial position to not only make your life comfortable, but to help others as well. And be like, you know what, I can go ahead and give this person in need extra $10 if they are truly, genuinely going to use it for something essential. So on and so forth. I can name endless examples. But in doing that sort of thing, you're going ahead and helping push this along further and work towards a better outcome, hopefully, than potentially worse outcomes that we could go ahead and have. Whether it be as, wherever you happen to live in terms of a city or a state, your nation, whether it be the US or elsewhere, or as a world overall, and human species, and of course, every single sort of species or manner of being in existence. But yes, I would say, in that sort of manner, we are, in fact, the new elders. We are coming into our own. And once again, we're not special little snowflakes. We're not necessarily just special because Devi and I are discussing the topic, and more so going ahead and putting our own, we're going ahead and addressing it. We are not necessarily the end-all, be-all. We're not special teachers or anything like that. We are students in of ourselves, and we are learning every day just like those who happen to be listening. And in that sort of sense, I know I went on a bit of a spiel and a rant, as I tend to do, but I figured that sort of clarification, and you going ahead and you didn't need that caveat, and I just wanted to go ahead and express a similar manner of passion that you in fact did.
Yes. And there's only one more thing I really want to say on this. We are the new elders. And so we actually have to come together as a group, as a generation, and we have to decide what we want our society to look like. We cannot let past definitions define us. We cannot let what was be structure on what is going to be. We have to be able to define for ourselves what we want life for the next generation and generations to come to look for, to look like. And if we actually do that, I think we have a chance of, within our lifetime, reaching some kind of balance, an actual temperance, an actual I can breathe moment, versus us literally having to constantly feel like we're running. Like since we became adults, it is just hitting the ground running and never stopping. We will find that point of rest. We will find that point of respite, but we have a lot of work to do before we can get there.
And it may be a bit ugly before we get to that point.
Ugly is an understatement. I have stated before that I have dreams that come to fruition. I have inclinations that come true all the time, and from everything that I have seen and I have felt, ugly is an understatement. It is devastating. It is heartbreaking. And I don't know what other word could really describe the feeling that I get.
But I don't think we need to try to define it in words. I think, honestly, it's something to be lived and experienced.
Agreed. Agreed. And I really wish we didn't have to. But if we put down the mantle and we do not step up to the task, nobody is coming to save us.
And you know,
just remember that.
Yes. And you know, just like the one video that you went ahead and showed me beforehand that we're kind of using to help brainstorm, as well as also more so on a personal note that you were sharing some cards from a new tarot deck you happen to order for yourself. One of the cards that was more so a standout in that was the imagery of a phoenix. And in this sort of manner, we go by a trial, or you can say a resurrection by fire. And as systems that do not serve us go ahead and get burnt down and all that sort of thing, whether we want it to or not, and that just being the progression of things, the cycle of things, we can go ahead and rise again. So for those who are Harry Potter fans, you go ahead and you remember in the Chamber of Secrets, Harry walks in Dumbledore's office, that particular firebird goes ahead and poof, turns into ashes. Harry's like, what the fuck? And then Dumbledore comes around and he's like, oh, no, you just went ahead and saw him on his burning day. And then he's just all nonchalant because, lo and behold, you got yourself a tiny little phoenix coming up and being born in the midst of those ashes. So, once again, like, it'll be tough times, to say the least. But if we can work through it, if we can go ahead and just try to do the best that we can in steering the ship or creating those small ripples, and whatever travesties may go ahead and fall upon us, individually or collectively, we can potentially go ahead and right the ship, to use that, once again, terminology and imagery. So yeah, I think we've gone ahead and covered that quite a bit in depth. The only thing I will add in addition, really, is that this is just part of a bigger cycle. This is something that has occurred before, and even though we're going through it right now, it will eventually happen again. Whether to us as humans or some other stage of evolutionary existence for our species or other beings, what have you, or other beings in different manners of existence that we are not necessarily aware of, or our language does not do justice to try to explain. So yes. Anything else, Debbie?
No, I think we have beat that dead horse. So, This has been Devi and Twisted on the Open Resorcery, and we will see you guys next time.
Yep, stay frosty,
Have a good one.
nieces. Peace.